Hi there, and welcome to the iBAC Tech Trek podcast, where we explore the outer reaches of insurance technology. I'm Tom Reid. I'm your science officer on this journey, and beaming aboard to join me today is Cam Muckosky, VP of Digital Delivery at Wawanesa Mutual Insurance. Hey, Cam, how's it going?
Hey Tom, it's great to see you. And at the same time, where's my shirt? I didn't recognize or realize that it was time to wear some Trekkie content, but thanks for giving me the heads up.
Your shirt is in the mail, so once the Canada Post strike is over, I'm sure it'll be delivered.
Okay, all right, wonderful, wonderful. Well, thanks for having
Oh, my
me.
pleasure. So, obviously, we have quickly uncovered that you're a Star Trek fan. So, do you want to dive into your own bio? How did you end up at Wawanesa in your current role?
Hmm, where do I start? Maybe origins from Klingon. I'm not sure. But it depends whether you want to get to new generation next generation versus the original versus there's I've watched almost all of them, but yeah, no. So me, I've been in the insurance industry now for a little over 12 years. I would like to say that I kind of fell into insurance. I'm not sure if most people choose insurance as kind of their choice profession specifically. At the same time, I would say most people say that once they fall into insurance or find themselves in insurance, they're very pleased. They're very happy. It's a very rewarding career. And so I would be in that boat where extremely rewarding career and one that I'm super happy to continue to be a part of, continue to kind of shape and move the industry forward. And yeah, it started again 12 years ago. Before I fell again into insurance, I was still in financial services, working for a company as a software developer, and then moved on as a software developer into where I work today, which is obviously Wawanesa Insurance, and started off as a systems developer. So that's where I get a lot of when we think about integration and data sharing and APIs. That's where a lot of that knowledge and experience comes from. So joined Wawanesa again 12 years ago. From there, went from developer all the way up to right now as the executive vice president of digital delivery. Throughout that 12-year tenure, I had the pleasure of doing many things, whether that's replacing our general ledger system, very exciting work, but you get to know how the business functions, and why things are a little bit why they are, which is wonderful. And then had the absolute, I guess, pleasure and opportunity to work on our systems transformation project, getting onto Guidewire for a number of years. And then started off with, I started a number of centers of excellence, so quality C4Es and our DevOps C4E. And then, like I say, now leading digital delivery and a part of the CSIO board of directors, and again, trying to shape the industry moving forward. But enough about me. I should have spoke a lot more about Trek talk or Trekkie talk, but beam me up or beam me out, one of the two.
Well, we'll beam up for now. We'll beam out later on. Uh, and I should mention that some of the work that you have done as part of your bio is going to inform some of the conversation we'll have a bit later, specifically around connectivity and CSIO and so on. So we will get into that a bit later. But let's focus on Guidewire for a second. There's a lot of organizations that have moved to or are moving to Guidewire, but Wawanesa, I believe, was the first. Can give us a high level view of what Wawanesa could now do because of Guidewire as their back office system that you could not do prior to that?
Yeah, the list is long. Let's just say that. But to highlight a few things, number one, first and foremost, as an insurance carrier, we really need to make sure that we're charging the right price for the right coverage and ultimately the right risk. And so rate sophistication is definitely an area that Guidewire has enabled us to improve on dramatically. Really, at the simplest kind of term there is the number of rate changes that we can do as an enterprise is significantly more than what we could do prior to moving on to the Guidewire platform. Additionally, it really enabled our organization as a whole to be connected across the country. Whereas before it was very much regionally focused. Not that we don't have regional focus today, but more from an employer or employment, sorry, position. So we can actually enable claims. Let's say there's a cat loss in the West. We can have individuals on the system all throughout Canada from West to East Coast, supporting our members at a time of need, which is absolutely huge for us. And then last but not least, I would say it really enabled us to complete our cloud journey. Wawanesa started a cloud first journey, the better part of about 6 years ago now. And so over that 6 years, our goal was kind of at the simplest kind of statement that we were rallying against just because it was a wonderful thing to think about, which is we wanted to get rid of the data center. We were building a new building, which we're now within our North American headquarters in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And in that new building, we did not design or develop a data center, nor did we actually want to lease a data center or space within a data center. We wanted to be 100% in the cloud for all of our infrastructure and core applications. And being on Guidewire actually enabled us to do that. It wasn't the key component, but it is the largest product or system platform product that we have in the infrastructure today.
That's awesome. So that's the inward view of Guidewire. Let's talk about the outward view. You're 100% broker driven. What have you done or plan to do that helps your broker partners grow their books of business?
We're in, I would say, an envious position at the same time, not looking to kind of tell, hey, look at where Wawanesa is. But we've taken that step early on to really build APIs and invest in a connected ecosystem. And with that investment, there's a lot of interest, right? So when we look at what we're doing to help brokers grow is really around that connectivity piece. So how do we make sure that brokers have the opportunity to choose their own platforms of choice or potentially build their own platforms of choice that can enable them to bring business into their brokerage? So online quoting mechanics, a lot of the insurtechs out there. So you hear of the Truthless of the world, et cetera, Quoties, the list goes on and on. So we're integrating with almost all of them. And if we're not actually in production with them today, we very quickly and very promptly actually allow them to connect with what we call our API sandbox, which allows them to log in, log in and see a list of all of our APIs. They can actually call our APIs. They can start building that integration in real time with our data and with our capability. And then we start working on, okay, what is that going to take to actually move them into production and then ultimately enable a broker to grow. And then as well, just recently, we achieved CSIO's minimum or commercial minimum data standard certification. And that was through going live in production with a commercial integration for small business with Applied's PolicyWorks integration. And we're actually looking and supporting Applied in their continued kind of evolution as they start to roll out similar functionality and again, similar real-time integration through the Epic browser product set. So yeah, those are just a few. And again, we're more than happy to take questions, take opportunities, and see what we can do to help brokers out.
API connectivity is near and dear to my heart. It's near and dear to iBAC's heart, so to speak. The leadership and work you guys have put in there is absolutely fantastic, and it's very much appreciated. And actually, speaking of that, so you've gone even further than that in terms of your own development. So a little while ago, with iBAC and the previous Wawanesa CIO, Wawanesa agreed to actually share.
It's okay. Sorry, Tom. You can say his name because it's just going to be my name. It's Cam. It's Cam. But
Yes.
yeah.
So, so yes. So both Cams, only one of whom still works at Wawanesa, agreed to share actually the fruits of your work. So you spent a ton of money and a ton of time developing APIs and API connectivity, and you agreed to share that with other carriers. As requested by iBAC, that has resulted in a significant project now being managed by CSIO called the API Sharing Project, where we're taking the Wawanesa APIs and sharing them with interested carriers, of which there's 8 or 9, I believe, interested carriers. So effectively, you took work you'd done, money you'd spent, and shared it with your direct competitors to the betterment of brokers. I should add, that's the point of it, to the betterment of brokers. Why did you do that?
The reason there is we just want to make sure the accessibility of connectivity across the insurance landscape is one that ultimately is again easy to access, which drives everything we've just been talking about, right? So drives the ability, increased ability for brokers to service their brokers, drives growth across the industry, and ultimately, in our case, drives member satisfaction within our members. And so it's very important to us to not only kind of strive towards that service excellence, which is a huge part of what Wawanesa is focused on right now. We've kind of not rebranded, but you've seen us in the market now. We've got maybe a little bit of a new look. We're really focusing on the member. We're focusing on our broker partners, and we're really looking to drive value outside of price, right? And so we're not necessarily concerned about access to quotes or access to information. We're really looking to, again, lower that cost of entry. And that lowering of cost of entry is not just for the carrier, it's also for the broker, and it's also for our BMS partners. But today, if you look at what happens is if Wawanesa wants to expose its quote information or its capabilities to a BMS partner and ultimately a broker, we have to work with and potentially invest time, money, and energy to do that. And it might be unique in the way that we do it versus if we look at one of our competitors wanting to do something very similar. Um, we need to, again, lower that cost of entry, lower that complexity bar to make sure that there's one way of doing things. And if you conform to that standard, you're going to find value on both sides of the equation in conforming to it. And that is a win-win situation. And so when we go back to the question of why, well, because again, it's win-win, and we want to be a part of that. And we happen to be a leader in the space, and so we're more than happy to share our wares, as you say, because it's not an area that's really going to necessarily differentiate one carrier to the next as far as the how they do it. It's more about kind of what they're doing and kind of what that secret sauce is, right? And to be clear, Tom, like we're not giving every carrier the line by line code of like the execution code of how to do this. We're giving everyone the contract, the data that's going to be passed back and forth um, in a technical manner, leaning on the CSIO data standards. And there's a lot of complexity there, or there's a lot of knowledge there, and that's what we're more than willing to share with our fellow carriers.
So, the way I conceptualize this, and you and I've talked about this, in prior conversations, but when you have data standards, when you have one way of moving data back and forth, it becomes easier for everybody because there's less barriers to entry. It's less costly. It tends to be quicker. And I know some folks have expressed concern about competitive advantage, right? If we send the same data back and forth, it's somehow that is overriding a competitive advantage. Well, the reality, in my opinion, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but the reality is that moving the data back and forth is just plumbing infrastructure. It is not by itself a competitive advantage. What a carrier or broker does with that data when they've received it, that is where your competitive advantage kicks in, right? So we can all have the same data. How I massage it, interpret it, use it, sell it, is my competitive advantage, and you will do something different, which is your competitive advantage.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So if we look at not even the insurance industry, but if we just look at many other industries as a whole and we kind of apply the technology lens, whether it's open banking in the financial services industry, whether it's just even the Google set of APIs that they have, where you can just anybody can go in and they can see those APIs, they can play around with those APIs, they can build upon those APIs. That's all possible because in essence, they're considered a standard, right? And that's really what we need to get to as an industry is that standard. And like I say, other industries have figured out that that's not the secret sauce. It's how you apply kind of the tools in the toolkit to what you build that really defines you in the marketplace. And so that's what we're leaning into when we say that, yeah, we're happy to share.
So speaking of defining Wawanesa's place in the market, um, as a result of the API sharing project and Wawanesa's leadership in that, have you received broker feedback? And if so, what's the feedback?
Yeah, the feedback's been tremendous. If anything, I would kind of summarize it as just like, can we get access to it? How can we be a part of this, right? So excitement. Excitement is really the main word that I would emphasize here. And yeah, I think again, we're excited as well, and we're looking forward to, again, future opportunities across our broker ecosystem and partnerships. So yeah, just overall, I think it's great to see that the industry is moving forward, right? This has been a difficult challenge for many, many years, if not multiple decades. So I've been in the game for a little over 1 decade. I'm sure there's many others that could provide much more context and much more experience to this, and you're probably one of them, Tom. So I'll leave my comments at that. So
I will say I've told this story before, but I want to say 2003, I was um, VP of IT at Intact for Western Canada, and my team developed a project to integrate with Applied TAM, um, PowerSoft, CompuQuote. So even before it was part of Applied, and Power Broker to the Intact Savers portal, and that was using the then CSIO standards. And I was super enthusiastic about it because with that portal we'd introduced double entry, and now we were getting rid of that double entry. And I was so enthused with this, I gave a little speech to the ING Western Canadian executive team about how this was the future and this was coming, and everybody's going to use APIs. And 21 years later, we're still
there you
we're
go.
still we're still working on it. So I tell people I still think I'm absolutely right about that. I was just super wrong on the timeline.
But we're getting to kind of, I'm and Wawanesa are getting to kind of build on the foundation that you and others
Absolutely.
have laid
Yeah, I don't
down.
know if I
So
call it a
thank you.
foundation, maybe a proof of concept, we'll say. But anyway, so that's
Okay.
not the only thing that you guys have brought to the industry through CSIO. I know there's another, I think, really cool being a relative term, concept you've pushed forward around an API security gateway. Can you talk about what that means and what benefits that would bring to connectivity in general?
Yeah, so simplest form to kind of think about it is the idea of like a hub and spoke. Everybody kind of knows the concept of hub in the middle, and then everything kind of connects to it and builds out the spoke. So the idea today, or not the idea, the current situation that we have today is effectively, again, Wawanesa wants to integrate with a BMS vendor. We approach that vendor. We're going to have to talk about security, user accounts or service accounts. They're going to have to figure out how they integrate with Wawanesa directly. And then guess what? Wawanesa is not just the only carrier in the Canadian marketplace. There's many others. And each of those carriers are effectively going to do the same thing. They're going to engage with a BMS vendor. They're going to look how they can connect. They're going to talk about security, set up service accounts, a whole authorization model. And what that happens, or what ends up happening, is you have effectively the technology nightmare, which is kind of the spider web effect, where every kind of connection in the web is unique, and they overlap on each other. Some are similar, some are different. And ultimately, you end up with a web that is very difficult to untangle. And never mind being a carrier connecting with a BMS, what if you're an insurtech, or what if you're a third party or a potential new player in the industry and you want to connect with Wawanesa or another carrier? Well, guess what? You're going to have to restart a conversation over again, meaning, oh, I'd like to connect with you. And you're going to continue to overlay and overlay and overlay on top of that tangled web. So the idea that we've brought to the group is this concept of a security gateway, again, hub and spoke, where we're looking for CSIO to potentially build out a hub where, very similar to eDocs, the eDoc mailbox, right? So all carriers submit eDocs or upload eDocs into a hub, and then all BMSs or brokers pull down, i.e. the spokes from that hub. So that's the concept that we're proposing for APIs. So kind of an API gateway where there is one way for BMS vendors or brokers to connect and get access to not just Wawanesa's APIs, but the industry's APIs. And it is one way to authenticate. It's kind of one service model to service them all. And then carriers kind of publish to this gateway, and expose their APIs so that, again, it's hub and spoke, and we get rid of this overlapping kind of spider web or tangled web that we have today. And we just see this as an opportunity to really provide a shot of an adrenaline, to this connectivity, um, space as a whole, and really gain some momentum. So we're not proposing that like every API get published into this on day one. Let's focus on kind of the concept of crawl, walk, run, fly, whatever analogy you want to do, where we can maybe start with a simple API. I know we've talked about this in the past, Tom, but like billing inquiry, very simple, but potentially has some high reward to it. I know everyone's looking for the big hitters, policy change and bind and all these, but those are exactly that, big hitters. And so I think we need to prove the foundation, or prove the technology or the architecture, which I'm confident is feasible, and then really go from that crawl, sorry, and then jump into that walk and then run, and then who knows, would be a tremendous to get to that flying state. But yeah, that's the gateway in a nutshell.
So let me just paraphrase that. So if we think about security, or to me, it's almost the same argument as API connectivity, is that there are things that are consistent across the board, should be consistent across the board, like security, like data standards. And if they're used in a way that is consistent and common and standard, then the cost for everybody, the hurdles for everybody to jump over, the time to spend to connect to all this stuff to make sure it's secure is reduced for everybody. And so data flows better, customer service can be improved, growth can be improved. So it's an enabling tool. It's not a competitive advantage. So it should be effectively as simple, as easy, and as cheap as possible. And the way to do that is to make it consistent across the board.
Yeah, and to visualize it, or to kind of or describe it, I would say, is let's just say in your favorite BMS, there was a billing inquiry screen. And so you pull up an account, and oh, it's a Wawanesa account. And so this billing, whether it's a little section on the screen or it's an actual kind of window or a tab, if it's Wawanesa and Wawanesa is published into these APIs, a billing inquiry, oh, you actually get to see the amount owing, you get to see the next, the billing date, you get to see kind of their billing plan, etc. And that's nice. But then all of a sudden, let's say you pull up another carrier's account, but they haven't published billing inquiry into the API set. Well, that real-time integration still exists, but because there isn't an API there, it just comes back with not available, contact the carrier, right? Or open up eDocs and look at one of the billing statements. But then the second that that carrier publishes their billing inquiry into the gateway, the next time you pull up that account, guess what? It's going to come back in real time with the magic numbers of how much do I owe, when's the next billing date, and what does my payment plan look like. And so again, when you talk about lowering the cost of kind of implementation, complexity, et cetera, you get into this idea of almost a dynamically improving or accelerating environment, which I think is again very exciting.
So, speaking of dynamically improving, I'm going to give you sort of a thought exercise here. So we've been talking about stuff you've done or stuff you've proposed, stuff you're very familiar with. AI is obviously all the rage these days, and it's almost mind-numbing to try to keep track of what is going on because it changes so rapidly. But maybe if you think a year or two down the road, can you talk about you know, maybe start with what Wawanesa has done to date with AI, and then maybe project a year or two down the road and talk about where you think AI is going around supporting carriers, supporting brokers with their businesses.
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. Maybe mine's a little bit better from a Wawanesa perspective, but yeah, and the world's guess is as good as ours. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of talk of transformational change. I've invested a significant amount of time over the last 9 months, if not the entirety of this year, in really understanding and exploring AI and how it can be applied in the insurance landscape. And it's not just me. Wawanesa as a whole, we really see AI as a strategic enabler, not only for brokers, for our employees, but also for our members, right? So again, truly transformational, and it's an area where we are investing currently, as you'd mentioned, and are looking to invest even more like heavily as we head into 2025. And so if I was to kind of pull kind of the blanket off of the crystal ball and ask and take a look, um, it's a few things because we have to remember that kind of responsible use of AI, governance, risk, they all play a part. And we take that very seriously at Wawanesa. And that's where we've spent a material amount of time is really focusing on making sure that we've got an operating model for AI built and ready to start kind of operating or executing against. And we've got the right governance and risk and compliance pieces bolted onto that. And we're more than happy to work kind of with industry and regulatory bodies to make sure that we're doing things, let's say I'll use the word quote unquote, the right way. And that's important to us. And so at the same time, again, if I pull off that blanket and I look at kind of what the future holds it really is going to be about augmenting what we currently do today to just make it better. And better can mean many different things. Better can be faster service. Better can be more knowledge to make knowledgeable and data-driven decisions. And then better can be automated, right? It's all kind of, I'd say, under those three pieces, but then you can apply those in many different kind of segments or categories, rating, kind of underwriting, service, billing, the list goes on and on. And we are exploring all of them. We've actually started this year the concept of a hackathon. So we've held a number of them throughout 2024. And each hackathon has been focused on AI outcomes. So we've taken real world challenges or real world opportunities within the Wawanesa ecosystem and we've kind of thrown them on the wall and flown people in, partnered with some partners that are strategic partners of ours. And we've spent 3 to 4 days to say, here's the opportunity, here's the challenge, or here's the problem, go. And we include everyone from our actual operations team, like frontline ops team, underwriters, claims adjusters, executive leaders, just technology leaders, technologists, so developers, you name it, data scientists. We've smashed them all together, and we've sat in a room for 3 to 4 days with the intent that we demo the outcome to our entire executive leadership team. And guess what? We've done that every single time. We have an actual product, an outcome that solves the problem, drives efficiency, or kind of meets the opportunity. And so those are some of the, again, outcomes that we're looking to actually push into production in 2024. And there's many, many more. So if you can't tell that I'm excited, maybe, I don't know, I'll have to find a hat or a shirt or something. But yes, the opportunity is endless. And I think the future of some ways in which we interact are going to change. But at the same time, we know that insurance, for a large part of, like, let's say, the transaction that matters, which is when a claim occurs, we want to make sure that we're there in the human way for our members at a time of need. And so that's important to us. And that's what we're going to continue to strive towards. And we'll leverage technology to support that going forward.
The world of insurance is changing because the world of tech is changing. Join us on the journey at ibactech.ca.